the Society for Conservation Biology. We have chapters that fall under the Global Society, and last year a couple of us decided to start a chapter for Zimbabwe, and so I'm the current president and work with a team who I will introduce very shortly. I think it's important to just say welcome to all of you, and it's really brilliant to have many of you that attended our first seminar in December with David Cumming joining us again this time. If you're new, we really welcome you. Whether it's afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are, you're really welcome. Tim, if you could just go to the next slide, please. So just wanted to quickly introduce the team that has brought all of us together, that we're working together as the committee for the chapter. There's myself, and as the president, Nobesutu is the president-elect, and we have Leo, who is our secretary, and then Tim, who is our vice president. And we're so delighted that at this seminar, we're welcoming Diane. Diane is our newest addition to the team as treasurer. Many of you may remember from the first seminar that Mo Angels was our treasurer. Unfortunately, she's got many other things and had to step down, but Diane has gladly accepted the role to be our treasurer. So we're very delighted to have Diane come through as part of the team. Fantastic bunch of people. Please do get in touch with them. And if there's any question that you might have about what we're doing and plan to do going forward. So we have a number of things that I think it's important at the start to just highlight as a society we're developing. And I want to give an opportunity to Team Nobesutu to share some of the things that we're doing before we welcome Professor Gandiwa to come through and do this, his presentation. So Team, over to you.
Thanks, MX, and thank you for your leadership. It's been wonderful to be part of this team. It's been quite a journey. One of the things I wanted to say at this stage is that we're all working full-time in other jobs, and so we're doing this on a voluntary basis. So I first wanted to just apologize that we've been quite slow in getting back to our members on the survey that many of you in this call will have completed. A membership survey we ran as a chapter of the Global Society for Conservation Biology. We wanted to really solicit the views and ideas of our potential membership base as we kicked off. And to date, we've had 73 responses to our survey. Many of you here will have completed that survey, some of you won't. We've now closed the survey, and I just wanted to give a very brief update on how we're doing in terms of analyzing responses. So analysis is underway. Using some qualitative data analysis software to look at the text responses. We asked questions like, what do you think the goals of our chapter should be going forwards? Here's a very basic pie chart of the kind of occupations our respondents are in. So the kind of people who have shown interest in the chapter so far, of those 73 respondents, many are in academic research. A significant chunk are from the NGO sector, and then a good number of students as well, and then a smaller number of government staff, those involved in business ventures and consultants. So we're really excited to have a diversity of people interested in our chapter. And I'll share in a moment an opportunity for anyone else who's interested to sign up and express your interest in joining us. And yeah, it's early stages yet, so it's an exciting time for us, for you to help us shape our vision and participate in it. We also have an active website in which you can find out more about what we do. We'll share a link for that too. Perhaps one of the Diane or MX can share the link to our website in the chat. These were some of the words that were mentioned in the survey: conservation, unsurprisingly, Zimbabwe, policy, environmental, community, and we're looking into those text responses a bit more carefully now. And overwhelmingly, the most common idea that participants in the survey came up with in terms of what we should focus on as this newly formed national chapter of the Global Society for Conservation Biology, and that was to form a community and a network. And there were some exciting ideas about what this network could achieve. A big one was just sharing experiences, sharing knowledge, sharing ideas. Another one was to link researchers with practitioners, to ensure that research is better translated into policy. Another one, being a global society, we have the potential to link the diaspora with those in conservation in Zimbabwe. So there's many Zimbabweans working in conservation who aren't resident in Zimbabwe, and we see a potential for linking up international and national conservationists. And then to just facilitate collaboration on specific issues and projects within the country. So these are ideas that came from you. Thank you for your ideas. Another one was influencing policy. So this was kind of the second most prevalent theme, and that was this idea that we can, as a community, advocate for good policy, and we can lobby decision makers and keep government accountable insofar as biodiversity conservation targets and so forth. And then two significant but slightly less prevalent themes were the education and awareness. I just put one quote in there. There were many quotes, just to show that all these data are from quotes from individuals in response to the survey. That promoting awareness of conservation issues amongst the public was highlighted as a key role that we can play as the Zimbabwe chapter. And then there was also mention of the SCB playing a scientific expert role, where we're considered a hub of evidence, information, knowledge that can be hopefully authoritative in terms of policy advice going forwards. And we're excited that we already have many academic researchers who've bought into our chapter and are excited to be a part of it. So what we'll do next as a committee is I will fully analyze these responses. That's kind of my baby at the moment. And then we'll have a committee meeting where we will discuss what people who've responded to our survey have highlighted and how we can take that forward in terms of activities for our chapter going forwards. I'm going to hand over now to Nobasutu, who will briefly highlight one of the projects in the pipeline that we're excited about, and she's kind of leading. Sorry, before I pass over to her, please do, if you didn't get a chance to complete the survey, it's now closed, but there is still an opportunity to express interest in joining the chapter. So there's the link if you'd like to. Now over to Nobasutu.
Thank you very much, Tim. It really has been a great journey working on the SCB chapter with you guys. And we're really excited to be working on the Horizon Scan initiative to identify emerging issues and opportunities for conservation in Zimbabwe. For those who are joining us for the first time, just want to introduce what Horizon Scanning is. So this is a systematic search for emerging issues, threats, and opportunities whose impact can be short-term or long-term. But then at the end of the day, there's issues which can help us to be more proactive with our decision-making and the activities that we embark on, and as well as help us to prioritize what is important and what we could focus on in terms of conservation in the country. And so with time, we're going to be inviting people to contribute to the Horizon Scan to enable this to be a success and also identify these opportunities. Yeah, thank you. I'll hand over to Diane now. Thanks.
Thanks, Nabasutu. Just before I talk to that, there are a lot of people who've joined us since we started. We've got almost 40 people, which is fantastic. Please do introduce yourself in the chat where you're from. Yeah, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. And what would be really great is if you hover over your own name in the participant list. So if you open up the participant list and hover over it, you'll see a little more button. And you'll see there something that allows you to rename. So if you, for example, have, you know, your phone or something is the name, it's hard for us to know who you are when you ask questions and stuff. So if you could just rename it, you know, Diane Skinner. I see Shylock in there with his name in. It'll make it easier for us to have a real conversation amongst us. So anybody who joins, please do go ahead and do that. Regarding the Digital Library of Literature, this is a nice low-hanging fruit that we are going to move forward with. There are many of us who hold our own libraries of useful, both peer-reviewed literature, but also tons of grey literature on certain themes, certain species, certain issues. So we are going to provide a platform where we will start building a comprehensive Zimbabwean library. You know, there's so much information in the parks libraries, in the university libraries. So we're going to try and seek funding to transform those libraries into digital resources, so they become much more available to all of us, especially new students who are starting their research, who's starting their career, and just really, you know, there's just been such an incredible history of work on biodiversity in Zimbabwe, and so we're excited to centralize that. Again, much like the Horizon Scan, this is in the very initial planning phases, but we're really excited about it. Anybody who would like to work on it, please feel free to get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. I'll pop my email into the chat. Thanks.
Great.
Who's going next? MX, you're on mute, I think.
I think we're just waiting for Edson now. Ready
Yeah.
to, is that right, MX?
Yes, I just wanted to say one or two things. So the reason why we did the survey is because we want to have a member-driven strategy. So a lot of the ideas that come through we will try and make sure that they are all included in our strategy going forward. Okay. So it's a real pleasure and to welcome this afternoon Professor Edson Gandiwa. Many of you may not know Edson personally. Some of you know him personally, but if you're interested in conservation in Zimbabwe, I am almost definite that you might have read some paper that he has written about conservation issues in the country. He's the current director of scientific services at Zim Parks, which is the agency that looks after wildlife in the country. And he has published over 100 papers, did his PhD in Wageningen University. And I know there are quite a few of you here who have gone to Wageningen and was at UZ, and before that did his undergraduate degree at NAST. It's such an incredible pleasure for Edson to speak to us today, particularly on CAMPFIRE, because he was involved in the review that the government did of CAMPFIRE, looking at how we can make CAMPFIRE appropriate for the future strengthen it, and make sure that it has impact both on livelihoods of people as well as on wildlife. So it's a great pleasure to have him to talk to us about that. And so we're very delighted, Edson, that you agreed to talk. So over to you, Edson. Yes.
Thank you very much, Tolisi, and colleagues from the Zimbabwe chapter related to the conservation of biological diversity. Let me, at this juncture, greet all the participants. I see a diverse list, and I'm happy, perhaps also to pick one of my, PhD mentors, Ignace Konik. Very happy that he's here with us, and look forward, to more interactions as we proceed. So I will show in my presentation now on the topic that we are more interacting with today. Also, just to mention that there are also some colleagues who we have participated in this process that are here. I have seen we have we have Shylock is here. Diana also participated in this process. So basically, I would imagine that when we come to the discussion time, we will also be interacting and also giving some of the views that would come, also questions. So
yeah,
I will.
Sorry, Edson, if I can jump in, Prof. Sorry, just to say,
yes,
please do put your questions, comments into the chat. We will deal with them at the end of Prof's talk, but please feel free to put them in as they arise in your mind, and we'll capture them at the end. Okay, sorry, Prof, to mess with your flow. I'll give you back the floor.
No problem at all. Just confirm whether my slide is up on your end.
Yes, it is. It's great.
Okay, thanks. So I will focus on the topic strengthening CBNRM in Zimbabwe. But I think, from the request that was made, much of the discussion will center around issues of CAMPFIRE review, which is the recent review that the government of Zimbabwe just completed, and now we are more in the implementation phase. So I will focus on just a bit overview of the wildlife conservation in Zimbabwe, so that we are all in the context of where we are and what motivated some of the issues, and then we'll tackle some aspects about the CAMPFIRE review, which is the recent. Just to point out that since CAMPFIRE started in Zimbabwe in 1989, or even the earlier phases, when our colleagues who have impacts and even CAS and other government agencies were working with CAMPFIRE, there has been other reviews that have happened before, and I would be happy later on perhaps to share with colleagues and team some of these documents that even emerged from this CAMPFIRE review. So this is an ongoing process in the bigger project that we have seen over the time. So I will give an overview of that, just pointing out the key aspects. I think most of towards the end, I will just focus on some of the recommendations that were made, so that perhaps we have a good discussion after that. So I will now tackle the first part about the broad issues about wildlife conservation in Zimbabwe, just in general, so that we are all moving together. The first presentation, I think, in this series, Prof. Cumming touched on the aspect about the evolution of wildlife conservation in Zimbabwe. So basically, before the white movement in terms of coming to Zimbabwe in the colonial history, before 1890, mostly in terms of wildlife conservation, the aspects were to do with traditional management systems. So here we would see traditional management systems being used to manage wildlife, and that was based on taboos, norms, among other elements that were there. And then with the advent of the settler regime in terms of introducing aspects to do with conservation, the famous start was the Fetos conservation, which had its origin in the early parts of Yellowstone Park and other areas in the world. And then as Zimbabwe progressed with the Parks and Wildlife Act, which was put forward in 1975, there were some privileges that were also given to private landholders. So in that dimension, it was the development, which was to some that were present, shared by Prof. Cumming. And then with independence of Zimbabwe in 1980, there was the need over time for for communities and also the indigenous people to be part of the bigger matrix. I think this was motivated by a lot of challenges that were faced at that time. For example, issues of poaching and also the conservation relationships that were not which were not desirable, which had negative implications on wildlife conservation. So here we see the development of integrated conservation and integrated development and conservation projects, ICDPs, which CAMPFIRE is part of under the CBNRM aspect. Nowadays, we talk more of other initiatives such as the transfrontier conservation areas, which I will just also highlight how many we have in Zimbabwe. So it's more, we are in an era where we are modernizing conservation, but also conservation has to meet the needs of those that are involved, those that are living next to wildlife. So this is just to give us an overview. So Zimbabwe is endowed with a rich wildlife heritage. It has the species of charisma, inclusive of the big five animals that we always cherish. In terms of the elephant population, the country is the second largest elephant population, second to Botswana. The last survey in 2014 yielded an estimate of around 83,000 elephants. We hope, this year there could be some plans to sample a number of areas. We hope that we'll get a better estimate, but the indication point to an increase in the elephants. And we have a diversity in terms of protected areas in Zimbabwe, private, state, and also communal. And Zimbabwe is endowed with the 6 TFCAs, which different developmental stages. And main biosphere reserve, one which covers the Mana pools area, and the world heritage sites we have three which are more natural and also covering part of the protected areas, and with Vic Force being one of the major world site that many would appreciate. So in terms of nature and wildlife, this is very prominent for Zimbabwe. Just to give you an indication that about 70% of the tourism inflows are mostly nature-based. So this is just a map to just put the context. So this is perhaps an old map now, also was developed in around 2002. So what we see is particularly those rich areas which are mostly careful.
Okay, so have we lost Edson?
I think so. I'll give him a minute or two.
Yeah, I think he was saying to Nobasutu before that he had some connectivity challenges. So I think we just wait a minute or two.
I think he is back. Okay.
I think his mic is on mute. Probably he muted himself by mistake.
Yeah,
I am up. Thanks, Taraki. Sorry, I think there was a drop in my connectivity. I hope you look when I left. I was on this slide. I just confirm.
Yes, that's right. Thanks.
Yes,
thanks, Prof.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So, maybe just to recap that the CAMPFIRE areas constitute a bigger proportion of the landscape in Zimbabwe, hence an area of interest. But overall, the country is about 28% under wildlife conservation. That is almost 13% under the Parks and Wildlife Estate, inclusive of the in addition to the gazetted areas under forest, which are also part of the bigger state enterprise in terms of protected areas. Then we have private land, which is about 1%, and then the other comes from the CAMPFIRE areas. But just to note that now with the transfrontier conservation areas, so we have another proportion which would need also to be much more ascertained as we proceed. I think the other aspects I had covered in the earlier discussion. So this is just to indicate to us, just in terms of the transfrontier conservation areas, Zimbabwe has 6 transfrontier conservation areas. 2 of them the Kaza and the Greater Limpopo transfrontier conservation areas. Those are much more developed and they have treaties. Then we have other, 4, which are the Greater Mapungubwe TFCA, which is, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and South Africa. And then the Chimanimani, Zimbabwe, and the Mozambique, Zimoza, which is Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Mozambique. And then the lower Zambezi, Mana, TFCA. So that one is also one key area. And I'm happy that, Besutu was championing that before, she moved to the other aspects. So those are the 6 transfrontier conservation areas in Zimbabwe. I will now move to the main, area of this discussion today, which is dealing with the CBNRM and CAMPFIRE. So I will just first introduce what CBNRM is, and then give the aspect of CAMPFIRE in Zimbabwe. So I'm sure many of us here may know and be aware of CBNRM. So basically, this is community-based natural resource management, which is based on 2 main understandings. That landholders are better placed to manage natural resources on their land than the state. So it's more of devolving their aspect of management. And also that communities have legitimate and urgent needs that can be supported by alternative land uses. So this is more of a dimension to be integrative and also be inclusive in terms of wildlife management. So the movement of CBNRM, as we all know, has been much more prominent in the late 70s, early 90s, where there was the need to have communities involved so that we have more integrated development and conservation initiatives that encompass development and also issues of conservation. So for Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe has been a leader in terms of CBNRM through CAMPFIRE, which started in 1989, although discussions, as were published by Martin, 1986, points to the fact that the early discussion started in 1982. So CAMPFIRE in Zimbabwe is 3 objectives. So the first one is to improve the managerial capacity of the key stakeholders at all levels. So we are talking about the spatial and also the vertical scales that deals with natural resources. And then secondly, CAMPFIRE seeks to improve the well-being of people by providing direct benefits. And third, but not the least, to manage wildlife and natural resources in rural areas on a sustained basis. So I think this was more integrating communities that were mostly affected by most of the creation of the protected areas, but more so that were at some stage not involved in the management of wildlife species. So CAMPFIRE is based on 6 principles, which are shown here. I will quickly go through them. So the first one being benefits from wildlife must be retained directly to producer communities. So ideally, those that are managing wildlife, would it be a village or a ward, they should be getting the benefits. Producer communities should be small and homogeneous. So normally when we look at a village or a ward, the assumption is that there is some common characteristics that those communities should be able to manage and work together. The third, producer communities must be given the full choice of how to spend their money and including both projects and cash payments. So already, I think even as we go through these principles, we may be seeing some of the shortcomings or weaknesses that needs to be tightened. Fourth, the rural district councils should keep producer communities fully informed and involved in CAMPFIRE. Fifth, there is need for open and competitive marketing. And sixth, we have, there should be, the ideas that we have to avoid unfair taxation of wildlife. So that when there is, for example, if there is a safari operator who is, playing, a part in any community, the taxation regime, whether it's the taxing that comes to the trophies, the hunts, all those other aspects, has to be minimized so that there is a value for the project. The key element about CAMPFIRE is what is termed the appropriate authority. So we are just mentioning that that's a delegated authority or even managerial responsibility that is given to the landholder or to the management structure in any given area that has to manage wildlife. That's normally the appropriate authority for most of the wildlife areas emanates from the amended Parks and Wildlife Act, which in the early days gave appropriate authority to the rural district councils. Of course, now we see that other DCs should be able also to devolve further to the sub-district levels. So that's one area which is of interest in terms of CAMPFIRE. So what is the value of CAMPFIRE over the years? So we know that CAMPFIRE has contributed significantly to CBNRM policy and practice through its experience in terms of technology and lessons. In the SADC level, this have actually helped in terms of moving the community-based natural resource management aspect to the other countries in SADC. And at international level, CAMPFIRE has been very important in influencing issues of rights to local people in terms of managing and also benefiting from their own resource, issues of sustainable wildlife utilization, and also contributing to the debate about common property management. So we see that CAMPFIRE has been a very important part in terms of the global dimension of conservation. Here I show one of our research, which looks at just how CAMPFIRE has been framed. So this is just to augment the aspect about CAMPFIRE has been essential in terms of its prominence, locally and also, internationally. So to your left, the panel or the graph on the bottom, talks about CAMPFIRE. And what we see is that since its inception in 1989, if you look in the UK, the USA, there has been some publications about CAMPFIRE. And in the early days, as I will show in the next slide, there were very interesting frames that were given. CAMPFIRE being important for sustainable wildlife conservation. But over the years, as the political and issues to do with land reform in Zimbabwe evolved, there has been a decline in publications of those articles about CAMPFIRE. But I think the take-home message from this is to say, CAMPFIRE has been a much of a discussion point in the global arena. So this slide, the table, just gives us the frames that were more important in terms of CAMPFIRE. So the issues of sustainable use of wildlife, although even in the early days, issues of human-wildlife conflict were also much more prominent. Income that goes to people, but also the benefits that actually come from CAMPFIRE. But of course, is one of the main frames that came is the aspect of towards 1999 or 2000, the issues about people dealing with CAMPFIRE and also the varying views that was there with the international world. But we know after the land reform in Zimbabwe in 2000, mostly there was a disappearance in CAMPFIRE related news in the world, although there were much more three dominant frames that were there: political unrest and land reform, and also the issues of blame game, which led to the us versus them frame. So ideally, CAMPFIRE has been, but of course over time, due to the political changes in the fast track land reform in Zimbabwe, there was also a shift in terms of how CAMPFIRE operated and the benefits that accrue to people. So this is a more refined map from the CAMPFIRE Association of Zimbabwe, basically dealing with the main ones with CAMPFIRE revenue. So as you will see, most of the dominant CAMPFIRE wards are those that are near big protected areas or the large protected areas. So we're talking about the national parks, the Kona region, Wange, those ones close to, if you go to the Zimbabwe region, which is covering the areas under Chizarira, the Chirisa area, and also the Mana area. So we are seeing around those big areas, we see a lot of dominance in terms of CAMPFIRE wards. This is attributed to the fact that when wildlife moves from most of the protected areas with the res nullis concept in Zimbabwe, then communities are also able to utilize the same resource. But more importantly, habitats in those areas is more intact, and also in most cases has been maintained to be able for animals to move. So to date, is by the time of the review in 2017, these were some of the issues that were coming from one of the desktop review documents. So to date, we have 58 districts in Zimbabwe out of 60 that are members of the CAMPFIRE program. So they have appropriate authority to be dealing with CAMPFIRE. And CAMPFIRE, roughly, as an estimate, actually about 800,000 beneficiaries, but that are coming from 200,000 households. So if you look at the bigger rural community, they are mostly benefiting from CAMPFIRE. So with the land reform, fast-track land reform in Zimbabwe, there were some changes in terms of donor perception of Zimbabwe, and the main donor being USAID withdraw its support to CAMPFIRE. That was in 2003, and that had 2002-2003, and that had major implications in terms of the revenue and also the projects that could happen. So we also know that with the adverse effects that were associated with the land reform and also issues of the economic decline, we started to talk and also hear about the negative effectiveness of CAMPFIRE and also the reduction in benefits, which also had an impact in terms of a negative impact in terms of livelihood. So this initiated first the discussion even within the CAMPFIRE Association to look at how to strengthen the vision and purpose of the program. So within CAMPFIRE Association, there was some documents and also some issues to do with how to move forward. Just to help us, so if you look at CAMPFIRE and how stakeholders are much more connected. So you will see we have the at the bottom the community representative or the producer communities. So those are linked to their rural district councils, as we said, that mostly in most cases they have the appropriate authority, and then they are linked. The RDC as being part of government are also linked with the government and other stakeholders. We have CAMPFIRE Association, which plays mostly the coordinating and also some, in many cases, being able to help capacitate and also play many other fundraising roles to help the RDCs and communities. So CAMPFIRE Association very prominent, and then with CAMPFIRE you have a number of private sector operators, safari operators, the business enterprise, and we also have a number of donor community. So it's a network, a web of stakeholders that are linked with CAMPFIRE. And as I mentioned in the last slide, with the withdrawal of donors, hence there was also an impact in terms of how the program would actually proceed in terms of its effectiveness. I've just put one of the slides and figures from the CAMPFIRE desktop review for just to appreciate, because many would want to this is one area where there are a lot of discussion about devolution and the other aspects. So what normally happens is when in most cases CAMPFIRE areas are having quotas where they utilize wildlife, and that wildlife that activity brings a lot of money. So in terms of how the revenue is shared, so basically 26% should go back to management of wildlife in that producer community. 55%, these were guidelines from the CAMPFIRE Association, which were expected to be somehow a guide to all the rural district councils that were in CAMPFIRE. About 55% should be revenue that goes directly back to the producer community. And then 4% is a levy that would go to CAMPFIRE Association. And then 15% also a levy that goes to the RDC. So basically, about from the 100%, we see that communities have around 55. It varies from one rural district council to the other, but that's the general guide. So what do communities use that money for? They use it to manage, depending on what they agree, because there is a CAMPFIRE committee which will make a decision on behalf of the community on what to do in terms of managing the employee times, some people who would be managing their books and also managing some of the enterprises within that community and all those other projects. In the early days, the prominence was that many communities would get household dividends, but this declined over time due to the increase in human population, but also as with changes in terms of priorities for the communities, there was more to do with communal benefits compared to individual benefits. And that's one area where many would say CAMPFIRE is actually reduced in terms of effectiveness. Why? Because in the early days, people would get money which they would use on their own and do whatever they would And perhaps that served as an insurance or safety net for many in cases of problems with animals or even challenges. So ideally, that's an area which would already be a problem, because with the economic challenges which we were associated with the land reform, economy, still, those benefits are to, are low. So just a breakdown of the composition of the income from CAMPFIRE. So what we see here is almost 90% of the CAMPFIRE revenue, the money that is coming from CAMPFIRE, is from sport hunting. And already that's an area of interest to say, with the global dimension where much more scrutiny is now given on issues of hunting. So 90% from hunting, what are the implications? And also we have noticed these, the bans related to the importation of sport hunted trophies. We have seen them from EU or even America, the USA. So we are saying those have an implication on what basically would be the main driver of the revenue. Then we also have ecotourism in many other areas, but of course we need then to diversify and improve that. They also sell products inclusive of the hides and ivory that comes from all those. And then with the other, basically would go to for both CBNRM and CAMPFIRE provides for even for communities to go into aspects like non-timber forest products, among others. But those are areas that are opportunities and already may actually be exploited as we move forward. So basically, when we look at other issues of CAMPFIRE, we said there is a guide about revenue, but of course there is some variation among other DCs. The main aspect is to do with the, one main aspect, lack of robust legal framework or mechanism for benefit sharing and management. So we're saying, CAMPFIRE is its most genesis, in terms of appropriate authority from the Parks and Wildlife Estate, and also in other areas, the Parks and Wildlife Act, and also there is the Environmental Management Act, which also has some aspects to do with communities and getting even appropriate authority to manage some areas. But we don't have a CBNRM policy in Zimbabwe or even an act. So there are areas that would need perhaps to be strengthened. Issues of devolution, other DCs were given the opportunity to hold the appropriate authority with future aspiration that they would also devolve that appropriate authority to the producer communities. So we have experimental areas in a way that have happened, which have piloted this, but in most cases, the appropriate authority is still at the Rural State Council level. Illegal hunting incidents, I think that one has been one of the key elements to say, why at times do we see illegal hunting in most, just close to communities, whereas in most is that communities should be the first line of defense when you look at issues of illegal hunting or even illegal activities. So over time, that led to some discussion to say maybe there is need to strengthen CAMPFIRE so that it plays its key role in terms of reducing the impacts of negative activities. Human wildlife conflicts, that's a big issue. Issues, was many have discussed the issue that at times when we have the growing elephant population, as we've indicated earlier, and also other carnivores that are mostly difficult for many people to live with. What are the issues to say? Are there any revenue that goes to as an assistance fund? Some have talked about the compensation. So those are some issues that we have actually we have seen and are continue to be issues today. Ownership and rights of wildlife, decision making and participation. I think there has been a lot of discussion to say are all communities well represented or not? Declining household benefits, as I've alluded earlier. There are a lot of publications. I just picked a few that talk about some of the issues. Decline, one of the key, first, areas of CAMPFIRE. There has been publications about the decline in the model. Even up to date, some are looking at, are the economic benefits that much that it will motivate many people not to poach but to conserve. And others have come in to say, we can progress CBNRM, and they've put some, some key. So there has been a lot of discussion, but the fundamental or key, finding is that even with all those challenges, CAMPFIRE has stood the test of time and continue to be able to deliver in terms of conservation. But what is needed is for it to be strengthened so that some of the weaknesses could be addressed. So nowadays, what we see in many cases is that the benefits are mostly at community level, and these would vary from one area to the other. Money would be used for electrification projects, schools, clinics, road maintenance, vehicles and equipment that they may use even for their own wildlife management. Some would do scholarships, some have goals, poverty, alleviation, and other livestock projects. So mostly benefits nowadays are mostly going to the community level. Whereas in the past, the benefits were for the individual, household. Now, there is that discussion to say, in the past we used to get this, but because of the changes in terms of the population, in terms of how wildlife is distributed because of encroachment or these other dimensions, all this is pointed to a decline in terms of the benefits at individual level. So here, this slide just shows the broader, on the to your left on the bottom is just the revenue that is accrued from CAMPFIRE over the years. So I think from 2007, 2008, there's no data because of the hyperinflation period that was in the country at that time. But on average, CAMPFIRE generates about 2.1 million United States dollars, annually. So that's money that goes back to the communities. So it's somehow, contributing to the bigger, conservation and also to the benefits. But I talked about human wildlife conflict. So from 2009 to 2014, that was fit into the elephant management plan at that time. On average, about 40 elephants were killed on BAC, which shows that human elephant conflicts are actually a big problem and needs to be addressed. So given all these background and issues of benefits, over time there has been a growing realization of the need to review CAMPFIRE. This was coming even from government and various stakeholders. And CAMPFIRE Association actually were also very instrumental in terms of looking at how they could strengthen regulatory and institutional framework to ensure that the benefit of it is to continue being much more pro conservation. And CAMPFIRE Association developed the CAMPFIRE Strategic Growth and Sustainability document, which was a document which was submitted for EU funding, especially after the elephant poisoning in Wang, cyanide poisoning. And then that was the genesis of the recent CAMPFIRE review. So this one day, elephant, poisoning, cyanide poisoning was very, prominent, and it was published in almost all the diverse media in Zimbabwe and beyond. So here, communities that were closer to the park were being questioned to say, if CAMPFIRE is very effective, why are communities not buffering the park? So I think that was one key element in terms of, pushing even the agenda. But before, we had also seen the challenges of illegal hunting. So here in Gonare Show, at one time, we lost a lot of vouchers only because, of the illegal activities dealing with the, poisoning an elephant carcass, and then we lost a lot of vouchers. So all those were growing cause to say, let's also look at strengthening CAMPFIRE so that communities really play the big part of being the first line of defense. So that's all that, with CAMPFIRE document, which was later, put for funding with EU and government, taking further, aspect in terms of reviewing the proposal and strengthening it. So that led to the current, or the just ended National CAMPFIRE Stakeholders Review, which was supported by the European Union with the government of Zimbabwe, overseeing the implementation of that review. The review was overseen by an interministerial steering committee that was inclusive of primary stakeholders within the CAMPFIRE dimension, the ministries and government departments. And the process started in 2015 when that interministerial committee was established. we had Satwa playing the key role in terms of technical support, in terms of secretariat role, and Dr. Chapmasterson was basically overseeing all the key processes. But for the actual work that ran between July 2016 and May 2018, the past review, had a team which was involved, and I'm happy that some of the key experts in that review are here. So we had the CBNRM team that had, Sisu Machena, Emmanuel Makiwa, and then myself. So we formed the CBNRM team. And then we had a legal expert, Ms. Dorothy Mshayawan. She looked at all the key elements related to CAMPFIRE. Then we had a very important aspect, actually, to get the views from the people, the communities, the stakeholders, which a team which was headed by Dr. Enoshale Muyemba who is here. And then we had specialist facilitators and also experts, David Cumming and Diana Skin. So those, were the main team together with Chapmasterson and the, overseen by the Interministerial Committee that worked on this. So just to give you the in terms of the review process and what came out. So all these figures I'm giving are mostly from the CAMPFIRE outputs, which I believe by now are public documents because they have been were endorsed by the relevant steering committee. So with the CBNRM consultants, so the team that I was involved in, first we did a desktop review which looked at the literature in terms of what has been written and also the genesis of CAMPFIRE and issues that were to date. The legal expert looked, came up with a legal and policy digest. Shylock and the team, Dr. Muyenga, did a survey in 5 districts with the main key districts of CAMPFIRE, and he spoke to almost 1,500 communities and also the key stakeholders. So all of those 3 main activities, we had our key findings and recommendations. And these key findings and recommendations were then synthesized, and we had some stakeholder consultation. One, first national stakeholder consultation presenting the results. Then secondly, we had the 3 regional workshops that were held, that is in Vicfors, Kariba, and Chirets. And then we had the final stakeholder workshop, which was mostly validating the findings that came from the review. So this is what we call the key recommendations. And of course, associated with those recommendations, we had a draft CBNR policy that was developed, and then a draft action plan for amendment of policy, and then a draft special instrument for fast-track amendment of appropriate authority confirming the regulation. So those were the main outputs from this process. The next stage from this review, after the government endorsement, was to move to phase 2 of the CAMPFIRE, now implementing those recommendations, which I think is the stage that we are at now, to say how to move forward in terms of what government is endorsed. And already the relevant government agencies are leading the process. So now I will move and just give you some of the the main outputs. So here I just put 2. The other documents, the reports I had, we not yet, I didn't get the final draft, but these were the final drafts. So the legal digest and also the desktop review, the other, which I think are now easily available, should be accessible. So for the remaining slides, I will just tackle what were the key recommendations, because I think this is what many would want to to hear and also contribute towards. So the first key recommendation dealt with the CBNRM policy and legal framework. Second, with institutional framework and capacity building. Third was the business model, and fourth was the knowledge management. So these were the main aspects that came to say how do we strengthen CAMPFIRE. Issues to do with policy, issues to do with the framework that is managing, and also how we enhance capacity. How do we diversify CAMPFIRE business model and the issues of knowledge management? So these were speaking to the objectives of CAMPFIRE. So the objectives of the review are those in 4 dimensions. So I will just give just an overview of what were the key elements. So the first item on CBNRM policy and legal framework. So the idea then is to look at, we need reforms. for those laws that we associated, which we are using now in the policies, there is need for them to be looked at. And the second point then gives the finer detail. There's need to develop an act, a dedicated CPNI policy and act. So we need that, and that's what should be happening in this next phase. We need to review and update policies. I think in many cases, even given the new constitution that Zimbabwe had in 2013, so there is also need to look at some of these and also changes that have happened over the years. And also repeal and replace regulations. As we said, the idea was then to look at issues of such, authority, how it could actually be even devolved further. So all those were some of the key aspects. And the last item under the reforms is to do with imaging some of the statutes that are dealing with the forest, because there are a number which corresponds from different acts. So those needed to be actually streamlined. Block in terms of the key recommendation is to do with institutional framework and capacity building. So the first being, in terms of coordination, there is a need to have an interministerial coordination unit that oversees CAMPFIRE. As I showed from the graph about the stakeholders, so there isn't that coordinating unit as of now, but the recommendation is to have it. Also, to be able to clarify roles in terms of preference for regulating CAMPFIRE, broadening CAMPFIRE association membership, and also strengthening its constitution to make sure that there is provision for devolution of appropriate authority beyond the RDC level. Coordination of support organization and capacity building with use of knowledge platforms. So we are saying the knowledge platforms, we are mostly talking about databases and even other new technologies that are being used. They should be well articulated and also easy for many to get data. So the idea being able to say, if we have all these institutions that are working with CAMPFIRE and also the various districts, can we be able to coordinate everything that happens there? Clarify role of traditional chiefs in CBNRM. I think that's one key element. Because many have looked at, even research has shown us that in some areas chiefs are very very important and also influential. So how then would they come into the bigger aspect about let's say if there's a CAMPFIRE committee, how do chiefs come? We know they have their own traditional leaders act, but for natural resources they are also very important. Looking at having a dedicated fund that deals with CBNRM. And also formalization of private sector, corporate social responsibility, related to CAMPFIRE. The third block deals with business model. I think many research and even the review, showed that the capacity is one key element for many to be able to manage. So building capacity in terms of managing, natural resources is viable business ventures, and also being able, to apply these at various skills. Secondly, promotion of alternative business models from the traditional hunting business. As I've indicated, 90% of the hunting comes, 90% of the revenue comes from hunting. So ideally, when we have shocks, currently there is COVID-19 pandemic affecting, almost, many sectors. But you could imagine hunting mostly affected issues of tourism. Promotion of environment for implementation of private sector investment in CBNRM. I think these are some aspects which are important, which would also be supported by the policy environment. Capacity building for communities to be fully involved in commercial ventures. As many may know and even have heard, most of the activities that are happening are not mostly coming, the business enterprises. Would it be safari hunting, or would it be eco, you are managing an eco lodge, or even community-based tourism ventures? Mostly these are done by our private sectors. But can we be able to motivate and also be able to capacitate communities to do this? The last pillar looks at knowledge management. So here we are just, knowledge, we are saying this now is important. Data. We know when we go to CITES, when we go to all these other conventions or even other platforms, at times data is not easily, consolidated in forms that are, easily, presentable. So knowledge management plans should be developed at eco-regional level. So we are saying, with the new, monitoring, evaluation, accountability, learning platforms, we should be able to learn, but also be able to to be able to adapt, as part of narrative management capacity. Robust quota setting processes, capacity building on how the communities are able to manage the key elements, and then dissemination of information. The second is to develop a CBNRM manual. So this manual would be very much inclusive. It covers CAMPFIRE, in terms of the hunting aspects. It covers, aspects of, if we look beyond, hunting, non-timber forest products. It covers even issues of communal forest. So, that's how can a community which is starting, or those that are running, be much more enhanced, with these documents. Third is development of appropriate information systems, including provisions for data sharing and transparency. So, as we said before, many questions, need to be answered with data, and the arguments need to be supported with scientific, evidence. So that is an important aspect. And then, above all this, a cross-cutting aspect is to be able to also have appropriate research capacity, that cuts across the main aspects. So broadly, these are the high-level, aspects of the recommendation that came from the CAMPFIRE, review. And these were presented to the government of Zimbabwe to the cabinet, and the cabinet, endorsed these the CAMPFIRE recommendations. And now we are at a phase where we are working on, actually mostly on implementation of this, on those recommendations, to ensure that CAMPFIRE has the momentum, that it had before, or it may not perhaps even reach that level, but somehow be rejuvenated in terms of delivering on the objectives that I have presented earlier. With that, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Edson, and particularly the fact that you've already highlighted some of the next steps. There's been quite a lot of activity on the chart, and would like to probably start on some of the questions.
Yeah, do you want me to jump in here? Right, so hang on, I'm just going to, no, that's fine. I'm just checking what microphones are open. So Prof, just to start, so the review has been formally endorsed by Cabinet. So that means those recommendations are now endorsed. So that means that we have not yet moved to the stage of having a policy in place, a high-level CBNRM policy, and that draft SI about devolution below the RDC, that's not yet approved either. Is that correct?
Yes, thanks, Diana, for those. So ideally, I think there has been some delay in terms of implementation. As I indicated, the formal process ended in 2018, but right. This document in terms of the recommendations were only endorsed in cabinet. It should be around July 2020. And okay. The cabinet has now returned to the specific government institution, including Zim to now work on those. And I can confirm that, as you have pointed, the aspect about statutory instrument, the manual, those are now work in progress. And great. It's more about the formalization to say how now do we engage stakeholders and move forward. So actually, that's where we are now. Okay, great. And there was a question from Power, I think, or Sibanda maybe, about the status of the human-wildlife conflict policy. Is that in the same sort of bundle of activities that are now underway? Thanks. So the human-wildlife conflict, policy, there has been, discussion about this for a long time, as I mentioned. Yeah. At one stage, I still remember there were some stakeholder consultation on that specific policy. And recently, government and other, stakeholders have moved the motion to have it, looked at. So with the development of even the documents that are here now in terms of the manual and even the policies. So these are one key element, which is on the list for it to be developed. Whether it will be a standalone policy or integrated, I think that's something that is being, addressed as of now.
Yeah, I mean, I think many of us with experience in that world, I think that's a place where you want to think quite carefully. You know, we all do, because if human-wildlife conflict is separated from CBNRM, it then becomes quite dangerous, right? Because you might end up going down the road of having, you know, what do you call it? Compensation payments that aren't linked to what people are actually benefiting from wildlife. And I know many of us who work in this space, it's a tricky road to walk. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how we can make that work. There's a question, I'm looking at all the questions that came in. So I think we've covered the question around devolution to chiefs and village heads. I think just to Mr. Jeke about that question, that's really that statutory instrument draft that Prof mentioned. So to date, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Prof, but you know, the devolution has been to the Rural District Council, and that SI, which is not yet approved, would allow devolution to, I guess, ward level. Is that as low as it goes, ward level?
So we are saying the sub-district level, it could be a village or a ward, you know, so any of the two, depending on how the communities would want to tackle the aspect of, you know, the structure. Okay.
So Fanwell has just put a question in, and it relates to his earlier question, which was, you know, in the massive changes that we've undergone as a country over the last 20, 30 years, are the governance regimes represented in CAMPFIRE still relevant? And Fanwell's latest comment is, you know, that the Zim policies of CAMPFIRE could still be driven by colonial mindsets that don't consider African ownership, traditions, governance systems. So, and also a question around whether hunting is the only economic tool. So this is really a question around, are we being creative enough, you know, in thinking in what the future looks like? So rather than being hampered by what the present is, you know, can we be more creative now about what the future looks like? Yeah, I mean, Fanwell, if you, I don't know if you have good network, but if you'd like to unmute yourself and expand more on your question, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Fanwell, shall I find you and unmute you? I don't know if you want to, you don't have to. It's not allowing yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm so worried our CAMPFIRE program in Zimbabwe, Gandiwa, because I think it's outdated somehow.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Fanwell. Your network is really terrible. Sorry, but I think we've captured your question. And I think what you just said was about being outdated. I don't know, Prof, if you want to respond to that.
Thanks, Diana. I think you had also touched it in terms of, you know, even as I mentioned, you know, when we had the CBNRM policy, you know, draft, I think the idea, you know, as I mentioned, now we have a new constitution. And we know, you know, as rightly pointed out, so the government is currently, you know, reviewing most of these acts. The Parks and Wildlife Act, enacted in 1975, yes, to some extent, you know, still has some of those, you know, past, you know, historical issues. But now with the current review of all the policies and acts, so basically we are more, you know, aligning those, and it has been motivated and also discussed in many areas to say, we need to be moving with the times. And I'm happy to confirm that even the Parks and Wildlife Act is actually under, you know, review. But more importantly, with the CAMPFIRE, you know, review and CBNRM, the CBNRM policy is more of an advancement. We are now advancing in, you know, using the modern day issues to build that one. So we know we have the other elements that could be more historical, but we need then to be moving, and this is where we are. Then Diana, just on the issue of being creative, I'm sure as we were also part of this together with Diana. So the issue about looking for the future, the scenarios are very important. But then the guiding principles, the baseline of sustainable utilization, among others, are some of the core that are driving all these things. But being creative, yes, as we said, now with all these other new layers of conservation, we are not only talking about CAMPFIRE, we are not only talking about it being only wildlife. With transplanted conservation areas coming, these are creating new layers, which by their own doing would actually be more progressive in terms of new elements that are more important in this day. Thank you.
Great. There was a question around the viability of ecotourism in CAMPFIRE areas with what you were saying around the decline of hunting.
Thanks. So that one a very interesting question. But what we have seen for those areas that have some ecotourism related ventures, and this even speaks to the government policies. Zimbabwe is a Zimbabwe tourism master plan, and in that master plan, it recognizes the community-based tourism enterprises. So ideally, the viability then is that communities would need to have this in a partnership or a business model, because among them, so to say communities start it won't be at times not very possible. But ideally, we know if there is some partnership arrangement that can really build some momentum. But more importantly, why we say ecotourism is a good option. We know, as we say, 90% is from hunting, but there are some clients who are more, who would want to interact with nature. And most of these wildlife enterprises for communities are closer to big national parks. So we can actually be also diversifying for them to be looking at not only within the tourism that is within their areas, but also being looking at the landscape approach. So there is an opportunity there. And there are some who may want to come, but only for photographic tourism, not for hunting. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I think that links to another question that came from Fanwell around the role of PPPs for CAMPFIRE. And I think I'd like to invite Maxi, if you're willing to unmute and ask your question directly, and also speak a little bit. Maxi, if you all don't know, works in Namibia in the support organization for the Namibian conservancies. And I think in Namibia, they have quite a good system of supporting communities through different levels of public-private partnerships. From the phase where a community needs a lot of support all the way to the phase where the community can run a tourism enterprise by themselves. So it would be really interesting to hear from you, Maxi, and also allow you to ask your question directly to Prof, if you're willing, if you're still on. You just need to unmute yourself. I think you're still there. Great, Maxi.
No, thank you so much, Prof, and thanks, Diane, for the presentations. It was very much a useful presentation, Prof, because Namibia learned from CAMPFIRE. Our existence is because of CAMPFIRE. The successes that we have at the moment, it's because of the lessons that we learned from CAMPFIRE. It would be very sad to see CAMPFIRE go, but one of the questions that I have, and I've been discussing this also with Dr. Muyengwa, is that CBNRM in general is going through, it's not just in Zim, all over Southern Africa, and also all over Africa, that we need to start positioning CBNRM a little bit differently. And my question is, and I think somebody also asked it before, the question is, how do we modernize CBNRM? Because we have our youth out there, we have different interest groups now. Our situations have changed. COVID actually has changed a lot of things. We have an opportunity now. Is there a mind shift in terms of how we would like to modernize CBNRM? And I'm not saying that we should throw out some of the traditional instruments that are already working. There are things that are working very well, but there's also the new ways that we need to look at. That is my first one. The second one is just that we in Namibia and everywhere else after COVID, and it's also before COVID, that tourism has been, CBNRM has been very dependent on tourism. It doesn't matter whether it was ecotourism or hunting, but things are changing. We need to start diversifying. Is it one of the recommendations that Prof also looked at? I maybe missed that, but that could be, can we broaden CBNRM rather than just looking at the two main revenues that we have at the moment? I'm sure there's others, but those are the main ones. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maxi. Great to have a voice from Namibia joining us. Prof, I'll leave it to you.
Thanks, Max. Very interesting dimension, but also I think the questions are somewhat very difficult. I will try just to give some views, but otherwise, some here may also point. I think modernization of CBNRM is something which is evolving. Why? Because we are now seeing different layers in terms of conservation dimension. In the past we only talked about perhaps conservation from the national perspective without even another layer, which could be coming from regional. So I think as we move, with the new initiatives that are dealing with conservation, we need basically to be looking at how do we integrate. I think, if Sherlock is still around, you could even, talk about issues of the youth, issues of, gender, mainstreaming. Now, just a few days ago, from our Zimbabwean president, he mentioned something of interest about, climate change being mainstreamed in everything. So those are new, aspects that we need to be integrating in terms of, modernizing, CBNRM. But I think many times when we say CBNRM, we tend to look at communities as not, being, able to, at times, be innovative in this. We relying mostly on the natural, wildlife, for example, without investment in terms of having conservancies, within communities would not yield much. So it's more about investment, and partnerships becomes important to say we have the wildlife as a resource, more like the mini game parks within the communities, being able to build this on their own, but also linkages with the broader other products that are there to share. So I think that's something which is ongoing, but we need more research and also to learn from other, perspectives in terms of how they've evolved over time. In terms of the diversification model, so that's one aspect in terms of CAMPFIRE, diversification. And as you mentioned, hunting and tourism are the main aspect that we see there. So they are the two main, aspects. But of course, we nowadays with issues of climate change and the, carbon, now there's a lot of talk about ready projects, all those aspects. So ideally, we can be taking advantage of the new, initiatives that are coming. How do communities just having vegetation? Vegetation should bring in money in terms of carbon credits, all those other aspects. But are we integrating all those in CBNRM as of now? So you see in other areas they do, in others they don't. So it's the over-reliance on one aspect, which would then, give the system, leave it more vulnerable to many other shocks or disturbances. And looking at all this in an integrated approach would be able to help to say, how do we buffer? And also we have been talking about hunting and all the pressures that are there. Now that elephants have been, listed as savanna elephants as endangered. So already this is going to put more pressure in terms of other, some of the philosophies that we have. But we need then to be able to justify, be able to be innovative, but also be able to, to be open to see new, opportunities even in that or that key aspect. So very important, discussion. But I think that's something which we may need even to further on in terms of how do we make it, more practical? How do we learn? Can we have case studies that are, happening elsewhere that we can also learn and also try to adapt in our situation? Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. I think that's really helpful. We have a few comments and questions left. There was one from Simbarashe, which I think is relevant to the first part of Naxi's question that you just answered, which is, should we as conservationists be becoming politicians? You know, should we be taking our issues rather than potentially, you know, sometimes some people think parks and environment and forestry is maybe a less powerful voice in the various departments and ministries that we have. So should we as conservationists be becoming politicians and really fighting on a different on a different platform potentially? And I think that links into Dr. Greg Rasmussen from the Painted Dog Research Trust. His question came very early in your talk around, you know, with climate change and crop failure, how do we really shift the priorities on communal lands to take advantage of much more resilient natural systems such as wildlife, and in particular to make sure that those corridors where Dr. Rasmussen is obviously linking through to the rest of CASA. So it's not really a question. I think these are all issues that we are grappling with. There have been a number of comments from Power, from Chisarira around, I think, you know, the devolution, asking about where we are with the various policies. And I think, you know, I think that one question that remains is, are those documents available? So the CAMPFIRE review, is it a publicly available document, and how can people access it?
Thanks, Diana. Thanks, colleagues. I think very, you know, interesting, discussion in points. So I think for to start with the last, point, these documents were endorsed by government, and what I'm happy I saw one government colleague, Yvonne Chingarandezi. So these should be available because I know once they were endorsed with the interministerial committee, they are basically public documents, and after the cabinet approval. So I think these should be available, and we know soft copies are available. Maybe what we only need then is to link up with. I will be able to link up with our ministry colleagues just to confirm on their access to colleagues, because they are important in terms of, we have been talking about CAMPFIRE review, and ideally we need the, many of us, even key stakeholders, also to be able to access this. So, yeah. But in terms of availability, they should be. Then I think the comments from Greg, very important. I think Greg, even from most of his experience and the research experience, the drive of the conservancies in Zimbabwe, most of them were, after the 91-92 drought, which was, massive in terms of its negative implication. And we had, Sawe Valley, Chirezi River, Bubi, and all these other that, came later. So just to quote one of my colleague, Dr. Xavier Poshiwa, I think in his PhD, he looked at, resilience of systems. And what he puts out very clear is that wildlife, access and insurance in most of these arid, areas where, you have droughts, wildlife is resilient. So it's more about, awareness. And I'm happy, for most of the Zimbabwean colleagues, that government has revised the agro-ecological regions last year. So what we have seen is the expansion of the semi-arid areas, region 4, region 5. So ideally, we need more extension. And that comes, I think, to the last point which was given. The last question, which also came to do with the politicians, conservationists being politicians. I would want to look from it from the intersectorial, or cross-cutting issues of conservation. Normally, conservationists, we want to talk to ourselves. But ideally, conservation, agriculture, this is an integrated system. So let's look at how are these aspects integrated. We look at them holistically, because we are all playing a puzzle in the bigger aspect. And I like one concept from Bioparma, which USN Bioparma, they talk about mutual gains approach. How can we benefit from using the resources that we have? Looking and not only saying I am in my own ivory tower of conservationists, but we should be looking at each. Communities should benefit from agriculture. Communities should benefit from conservation. Community should benefit from mining. So I think even Max's point about how do we modernize? We are modernizing in that we don't only look at communities from the wildlife perspective. We look at communities as an integrated system where every other sector should be contributing something to the community. That way, we don't put much pressure on any sector that we may talk about. And we don't compete, but we complement each other. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. That's a really great final comment. I'd just like to, you mentioned Shylock. Shylock, I don't know if you want to add anything to what Prof has said, and then we will start to wind down. If Shylock's there, you'll have to unmute yourself. I think he's still there. Yeah.
Thanks, Diane.
Oh, we've lost you. You still there?
Hi, Dan.
Yeah,
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think Prof has covered pretty much all that needs to be said. But I think the introspection that is required here, I think it's beyond the SI, beyond the conventional sort of enterprises that we are thinking of as we devolving further down. If the devolution is going to take place, I think people need to start focusing on what are the governance and management implications for such a process, which areas need to be strengthened. So I think the planning is now, and also even the support towards building robust data systems. People need to be starting to brainstorm around these issues to make sure that when the devolution occurs, to whatever level that government feels it needs to be, then it has to be accompanied with complementary support to ensure that the process doesn't fail. Those are my few contributions. Thanks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I hope that the donors that have been supporting the review process are going to step up and support, the significant costs that will be entailed in those types of support and capacity and so on. Okay, I think, sorry. I think that's it. We have some really great additional chats going on in the chat, but we are now running out of time. So anyone who wants to just quickly read through that would be great. Otherwise, I will hand it back to MX to close.
Thanks, Diane, and thank you as well to Edson for such a wonderful presentation. I think this is a topic that very close to people's hearts, probably because of what Maxi said. Zimbabwe has been leading in this, and I think the whole idea of this review is to renew it and in some way contribute to a new conversation and modernizing, as some people have said, CAMPFIRE going forward. So thank you very much, and thank you to everybody that attended. Just to conclude, I just would like to say our series will continue, and we have very exciting seminars coming in the future around lions. We're hoping to talk about elephants, talk about wildlife, domestic animal interface, freshwater, agriculture, and biodiversity in the country. And I'd like to really encourage all of you to keep your eyes peeled to the adverts that will be coming out. We also would like to ask many of you that are not members of the Society for Conservation Biology to join us in being members of the Society for Conservation Biology. We do realize that a number of people, you might be facing difficulties with making payments or even raising the money. Please do approach many of us. We're trying to find solutions to those issues. As Tim said at the beginning, we've now got our survey results out, and we'll be analyzing that, and in due time, reaching out to many of you to be involved in our strategy going forward. We would like many of you to really feel free to be a part of what we're doing and get involved one way or the other. So having said that, once again, I want to say thank you, Edson, for this wonderful presentation, and for many of you that have attended. And if you may, I would like to ask you to get your cameras on so that we can have a picture of this wonderful, I think at the height we had 55 of us. So if you can, please do get your camera on. We want to take a picture of many of you, and I'll ask the team to just take a picture of you. There's love more there. And Charles, it's so good to see you. Thank you for all the work that you've done for CAMPFIRE. And thank you as well. Team, do let us know when we've had a picture of this wonderful congregation online.
Yeah, I'm going to do it in 3 seconds.
Excellent. Right, thank you very much. Once again, we really appreciate, and until next month, we just want to say thank you and see you next time.
Thank you everyone. It was great.
Thanks everyone.
Sharing the day with you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Hi, everybody. Looking forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Greg. It was good to see you.
Thanks to everyone. Cheers. Next time.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks, Admire. So good to see you, Power.
Thanks for everything, policy.
Yes, thank you.
Team, thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, Admire. Team and Nobs and Diane, let's just remain for a few minutes.
I think I can rudely kick everyone out.
Can you?
Yeah, I think go ahead and do that. I can't, I've somehow not, I've unbecome a host. I can't do anything.
Sorry, I have to do it one by one. Sorry, guys, can we ask you to log off?
Nobesutu is now gone.
I hope I didn't kick her out.
Did you?
I might have. I don't think
you might have kicked her out. Guys, what did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was good.
Yeah,
I mean, basically nothing's happened for 2 years. So, you know, I was kind of hoping that there'd be a little bit more progress to show, but there isn't. Yeah. So that's life. But I think lots of people on there were maybe not up to date. So that's fine.
Yeah. Thank you. I think you handled the questions very, very well. I was really, really delighted with that. And
oh, it was great. We had Maxi there, so we could have a Namibian, you know, jump in. That was really cool.
Yeah. In fact, one of the things that I think it occurred to me when we're doing this is maybe next time when we do one, we should have 1 or 2 people ready as like respondents. I think that would really make it livelier and really engaging.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely if we do that elephant one, we want to plan that one out really carefully in that way, because it's such a political topic. But yeah,